He kōna ipurangi tēnei nā te reo irirangi o Aotearoa.
No mai whakarongo mai ki te Aotai whenua. Welcome to Country Life. I'm Sally Round.
Lovely to have your company. Thanks for joining us. Ko Janina Schwaneka aho. Today, I'm taking you with me on an exclusive look inside a clinic looking after wildlife and zoo animals.
We're at a forum where scientists discuss the pros and cons of nitrogen use, and we'll have a wrap of news from the Rural News Desk.
But first, Cosmo's at Prebbleton Peonies with Sasha Coogan.
We are an export peony farm, and our season runs from mid-October to about the beginning of December.
Yes, and I can see behind us some of the peonies are just about to flower.
It's deceiving. These guys are probably about a couple of weeks off. We've got 22 varieties here, and they all kind of look different throughout the season. So it peaks around mid-November, and that's when we get about 8 or 9 varieties all at once. But they range from red, white, pinks, mixed, light pink, yeah.
Lots of beautiful colours. And how many plants do you have?
23,000.
Are you harvesting every day at the moment?
Yeah, and on a hot day like this, they move pretty quickly, so it's a speed game. And so our pickers pretty much start at 9. They will be going until about 2, and in the grading bay, we've got workers as well who are constantly grading and processing and stripping the leaves. And yeah.
Yes. And where do the flowers go?
Northern Hemisphere mainly, so we export Japan, the States, Europe, the opposite hemisphere that aren't growing them at the moment, basically. Yeah.
You also sell to the public. I mean, your gates are open, aren't they?
Yes, absolutely. 2 years ago, we opened the shop. We realised that there was a lot that didn't make export grade for the smallest reason, being was missing a leaf or the stem was a bit too wonky, and the market was here. They love the product. It's almost got a cult following. So we created the shop. We sell our seconds through there, and yeah.
So who do you grow peonies with? Is this a family business?
Yes, it's family run. So we took over about 10 years ago. Before that, I actually worked for the previous owners just for a wee summer. And my folks are behind the scenes. I took over a couple of years ago. My brother swans in and out when he can. Hey, Matt. But other than that, we've got a seasonal crew. But this year we had so many repeat staff. We've pretty much got repeat staff and some travellers. Yeah, so it's very seasonal.
Everything's geared up towards now, the whole year.
100%. There's a bit of maintenance through winter. Actually, a lot of maintenance. People call this a lifestyle block, but other people I've heard call it a life sentence block, but it's really not. I love it.
And the plants are well protected because this paddock is surrounded by tall windbreaks.
Yes, yep. Definitely want to protect them in the wind. You'll see some have wires around. So that's a system just to keep them upright.
Because the plants are quite top heavy, and I imagine they could flop over quite easily.
Very easily if not protected, yeah. But some are fine. There's almost no rhyme or reason to it. There's no rules with peonies. There are, but there's also not.
So are people harvesting right now?
Yes, they are out in the backfield with the corals.
Can we go and have a look?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Thank you. Sasha, what do you love about growing peonies?
The office, more than anything. When I get to call this my office, it's pretty good, yeah. We developed all this side as well. So prior to that, it was just the other area. We've grown it quite a bit since then.
Now we're on the other side of a windbreak, and as well as there being row upon row of peonies, there's also trees and shrubs and natives. It's kind of like a secret garden.
Yeah, with the pickers out there doing their thing. So this is Mum's beauty. Mum takes a lot of pride in her garden. We actually had my brother's wedding here a couple of weeks ago, and that's one thing we're wanting to do as well, is just offer weddings and events and venues. And
yes. Now you've got, 4 pickers at the moment?
3 pickers. Dad probably wants one more, but 3 pickers, 1 runner, and they pick, give to the runner drives them into the chiller. You've got to keep them cool. On a day like this, it's keeping them cool because you pick them at a certain stage for export, and then it's a matter of getting them in the chiller, boxed, and into the airport.
Every day they're going overseas. Mm-hmm. So you have to be quite organised.
Oh yeah, systems. I'm definitely a systems person. But there's a few farms around. We've got our friends down in Sheffield, Alpine Peonies. And yeah, there's quite a few around Christchurch, but I think we're the closest one to the city. So our location is really nice.
So it's easy for you to get them out. Well, let's go and have a look and find out what a top grade peony looks like. How many grades are there?
Technically 5, so minus A, double A, triple A, and double A. Yeah. So this is my dad, John. Hi, Dad.
Hi, John. What are you picking now?
These are coral sunsets, so they're an export flower, and we pick them to a grade that suits export, which is quite tight, so that they don't open, and they'll sit in a chiller for a couple of weeks, and then when they get warmed up again, they open up.
So I guess you have to be quite strategic when you're picking for export.
It's a very tactile thing. You've got to be able to you just get a feel for it after a while. Each season you learn a bit more, and each picker does it slightly different, but you aim for that constant standard, and the exporters check them, and they'll let us know if the standard, or if they're too hard, too soft, just right.
Yeah. What makes an A grade peony?
Size, shape, colour, how it sits.
You're holding some freshly picked flowers, Sasha. Are they export grade?
2 would be. 1 will go straight to our shop, but purely because it's slightly more open than the other. The stems look good, the leaves look good. It's just you want to keep them a little bit tighter just for that transit and that sit time in the chiller.
Now beside us, a flower is already in full bloom. What variety is this one?
I would say that is an open sunset that is not suitable for export. But no, so corals are beautiful. We've got 4 different corals on the farm. There's coral sunset, coral charm, pink Hawaiian, and supreme. So they all start as these beautiful coral kind of colours and fade. These are the only ones that have that gradient colour of fading from this bright, beautiful, lush coral. Then they go yellow to white, basically.
And once they've opened, how long do they last?
The ones you get from us will give you a good 7 to 10 days.
Yeah. And do you get quite a few people stopping off on the way home from work?
Yeah.
Looking for some flowers?
Yeah, since we've opened the gates, it's been very, very busy. And after we've finished 3 of our varieties, corals being one of them, we actually open up to the public for a fill your bucket event. And you just, come in, grab a bucket and walk through and pick your own. And we had a little teaser one last night, and it was great.
And so at the moment, is this a good business? Are you making a reasonable profit from selling peonies?
Yeah, we expanded our markets with the shop, which is good. But export, we're price takers, so it does depend on the market. And if you can get them in early, the price is better. But it's always a gamble, to be honest. We're really kind of told what to do with prices.
Yeah, but prices are okay this year?
Yeah, no, it's good. Look, it's a lifestyle as well that you choose. Yes. Like I said, this is our office, so I don't think I'll ever go back to working a 9 to 5.
Sasha Coogan there from Pebbleton Peonies. To see some colourful photos from the day, go to rnz.co.nz/countrylife.
Now for a look at what's been making headlines on the Rural News Desk this week. Firstly, to the impact of Donald Trump's success at the ballot box on New Zealand farmers and growers. And it's a nervous wait and see to his proposal for a big hike in tariffs. The President-elect has signalled a tax increase of between 10 and 20% on imported goods. Beef and wine are our largest primary exports to the US, $800 million earned from wine last year and $2.2 billion from meat. In fact, the US is New Zealand's largest market for wine, and it's the country's largest supplier after Italy and France. New Zealand Wine Growers Chief Executive Philip Gregan says he's been fielding calls from concerned growers.
Mr. Trump's been very strong on the tariff issue during the election, but we've got no idea whether they will be implemented. What's the time frame? What's the level? As to who pays, if there were tariffs, that's very much a matter for discussion between exporters and importers. The US is our largest market for New Zealand wine. It's been a major driver of growth of exports for our industry over the last 10 years. So it's a market that's very important to many of our exporters.
Former senior government trade negotiator Charles Finney says a rise in tariffs would mean squeezed margins for exporters, but there's potentially a silver lining.
There will be opportunities created. So if it goes ahead and imposes 60% tariffs on China, China will retaliate. I'm sure US agricultural product will be top of the list of items for retaliation, and that might create opportunities for us in China.
Dry conditions over the past couple of months in Hawke's Bay have farmers on a knife's edge, and they'll have some tough decisions to make if it doesn't rain soon. Mark Warren of Waipari Station, east of Waipukaro, says while a dry spring is not unusual for early November, it's much drier than usual.
It had a benefit that we had very good lamb survival in that sort of late August, September period, and there's been a pretty good sort of a docking, lamb survival, so that's going to be positive. But yeah, we are starting to look for a bit of rain at the moment. Spring crops are looking a bit thirsty. They're gasping a little bit, and we just take what we can get.
Many farmers are irrigating heavily, so crops like corn and squash take off, but farmers say the sunshine's been good for the lamb survival rates.
The cost of butter will continue to rise for consumers after a solid lift in prices at the global dairy trade auction this week. Butter prices rose 8.8% to $6,990 a tonne. Demand is said to be up due to flat dairy production in the Northern Hemisphere, combined with solid demand from the Middle East and Southeast Asia.
Horticulture New Zealand is warning constrained production under the government's current freshwater rules will see produce prices soar. The government is considering its freshwater national direction, but in the meantime, regional councils are making plan amendments to measure and restrict contaminant discharge. A new report commissioned by Hort New Zealand says prices of broccoli could go as high as $9 a head if vegetable production is cut by 20% as a result of proposed regulations aimed at reducing nitrogen runoff.
A forestry consultant says in the past 6 months, between 40 and 45 harvest logging crews have gone out of business around the country. Alan Laurie says work resulting from Cyclone Gabrielle is now complete and crews have returned to home regions to find work has dried up. He says harvesting's probably at a more sustainable level now compared to the wood volumes of 2 years ago, but for those whose business has crumbled, it's tragic.
In reality, we probably don't want that production back. We want to maintain the current levels at lower numbers just to ensure that we're supplying really what the market wants, and that's the challenge for New Zealand right now.
Alan Laurie says with intense urbanisation and apartment construction finished in China, that market's likely to remain subdued. But India's growing economy is another outlet for New Zealand logs.
A Taranaki dairy farmer dying from prostate cancer due to exposure to pesticides has had to fight ACC for 2 years to receive compensation. The farmer, who we have agreed not to name, now has less than a year to live. ACC first declined cover for the 53-year-old and then came through with a low-ball offer when an independent reviewer approved him for cover. Lawyer Merlin Remians says ACC landed on an initial impairment rating of 55%, which meant the farmer would get just over $66,000. But after it was challenged, it was raised to nearly $161,000. He says it's incredibly frustrating people have to fight for the compensation they deserve. ACC says the impairment rating was updated after receiving further information.
Sales of lifestyle blocks are up as more people leave the city for the country lifestyle. New data from the Real Estate Institute of New Zealand shows in the 3 months to September there were 1,400 lifestyle property sales, an increase of 45 sales or 3.3% compared to the previous 3 months. In the year to September, 5,699 lifestyle properties were sold, worth a total of $6.34 billion.
A new company called Zoffy is hoping to create a coffee alternative from Coprosma, a plant native to New Zealand. Zoffy founder and chief executive Jack Keys says initial funding from Agmart 3 years ago helped develop a coffee-like drink from the plant, and now new funding from the Ministry of Primary Industries will help get the product to market. He says they've partnered with 2 farmers and are hoping to increase plantings with collaborator Iwi Ngāti Tamatera.
I'd like to see native Zoffy plantations planted biodiverse plantations all around New Zealand. The idea is that it can be used as a diversification option for farmers wanting to plant up parts of their lower performing land into something that's going to improve the environment and still give them economic return.
Jack Keys says if everything goes to plan, Zoffy should be on the shelves within 18 to 24 months.
The future for local snapper farms is gaining momentum as the 4th generation of special snapper are spawning in captivity at the top of the South Island. Plant and food research is growing the finfish to potentially reduce reliance on wild fish stocks and keep up with the global demand for seafood. Professor Maren Weyenreuter says the aquaculture breeding program started 20 years ago.
Currently, we are holding them here in Nelson at our finfish facility, where we hold the broodstock of snapper, but we've also been growing them in our sea pen, which is located in the Marlborough Sounds at Beatrix Bay. We are leasing the sea pen of Ngāi Tahu Seafood, and they have been growing there very well and showing really good potential for aquaculture.
Professor Wayan-Reuter says a larger commercial trial could be underway within the next couple of years.
And finally, Surfing for Farmers is returning to beaches across the country, starting in Gisborne this week. Stephen Thompson started it 6 years ago to encourage farmers and growers to step away from their all-consuming businesses by getting out on the water for a surf, to enjoy a barbecue and share some stories.
We're now in 25 locations all around New Zealand, and we've just had people ring up and say, hey, we need this in our town. Can you help us? And we've helped people set up around different beaches all over New Zealand, and they've just kept growing. Like the number of regions is growing, the number of participants are growing, and I guess the feedback is just the proof's in the pudding, the fact that we're still going and we're still growing, and week on week we get farmers coming down long windy gravel roads to come to the beach to just have some time out and have a go, really.
And that's the latest from the Rural News Desk.
This is Country Life on RNZ National 101 FM.
Now we're heading to an ag-focused science event at Lincoln University with Cosmo Kentish-Barnes. He's with Emeritus Professor Keith Cameron from the Department of Soil and Physical Sciences.
Today we're holding a forum on nitrogen. This forum is organised by the New Zealand Institute of Agricultural and Horticultural Scientists to look at the details underpinning nitrogen and its use in agriculture, horticulture, and its impacts on the environment.
And who is the audience today?
The audience is dominantly scientists, because it's going to be a scientific debate about the details that underpin the nitrogen cycle, how nitrogen cycles through the atmosphere, soil, plant and animal systems, and looking to maximise the benefits from nitrogen whilst minimising the environmental impacts of nitrogen.
Who have you got talking today? Who's on the list, the speaker list?
So we've got Professor Richard McDowell, who's the Chief Scientist in our Land and Water National Science Strategy, Tim Davey from Environment Canterbury, Murray Close, Principal Scientist with ESR, Warwick Cato from Balanced Agri-Nutrients, Professor Jackie Keenan, who's from the Department of Surgery at the University of Otago, and she's going to be describing other colorectal cancer risk factors in Canterbury, other than just nitrate in drinking water, which seems to be the concern. We have Mike Baer, Principal Scientist from Plant and Food, Alistair Black, Senior Lecturer at Lincoln University, Professor Jacqueline Routh from Lincoln University, and Emeritus Professor Alison Stewart, who's CEO of the Foundation for Arable Research.
Gosh, what a lineup!
We had quite a lineup, and I've just listened to some of the conversations on the way in, and people are saying how much they're looking forward to a rigorous debate.
Standing beside Keith is the organiser of the forum, Professor John Hickford from Lincoln's Department of Agricultural Sciences.
My job is to sort of oversee that the event occurs, keep the conversation civil but also detailed, and make sure that everyone goes away with something positive from meeting today. And my focus was, we think we know all the solutions when it comes to nitrogen and nitrate loss and water quality, but really we know so little, and so we need to have better discussions and confront the issues, talk about what we know and what we don't know, and we need to do it more regularly if we're going to solve the problems that we face.
And this forum is open to anyone, and in fact, as well as lots of scientists mingling in the foyer here, I can see some younger people coming in, some students.
Absolutely, we try and get the students here. We've got an issue recruiting into science at the moment, so getting the young ones here, that makes me feel good. We've got to change the balance. If you look around the room, you'll see there's a lot of, like me, stale pale males, but science is changing too, and I'm very keen to see young people engaging with these challenges if we want to continue the way we are in this country in terms of accruing most of our income from agriculture, but doing it in a responsible, sustainable, more sustainable way. That's what we need to do.
And the forum today is called Nitrogen, Friend or Foe. What's the meaning behind that kind of overriding title?
Well, so plants need nitrate to grow. So if a plant can't access a source of nitrogen, it can't grow, because nitrogen's part of protein and DNA in plants, and everything needs DNA. So you need nitrate for a plant to grow. So anything, be it a native forest or a production system on land, requires nitrogen to get into the system in some way. That can be naturally acquired nitrate that comes from the activity of microbes, but we can also add it as a synthetic fertiliser too. But obviously the moment you start putting nitrogen into a system, you can potentially lose nitrate out of the system, and it's nitrate that you lose, it's the oxidised form that's soluble. So nitrogen is at the heart and the core of life. Sometimes it goes where we don't want it to, and sometimes it comes from places where it's expensive, or we can't afford to use it, or whatever else, or we can't manage it effectively. And that's what Friend or Foe is about. Is some instances it's good, others it's bad.
There is huge amounts of work being done. Farmers are already making huge gains from what I see on the ground.
Yeah, look, I think one of the great things about New Zealand farmers is they've responded to so many of the environmental challenges that have come along. I'm seeing amazing things on farm. Their adaptability, the way they respond to the messages they're hearing. They feel very browbeaten, there's no denying that, but they're also responding really well. We should be proud of what our farmers do. I've always said that, because they are themselves scientists in their thinking, and they respond appropriately. There's very few that go to hell with it all, I'm going to ruin the planet. They're there trying to run a business with all the challenges that they too face in their business operation, including managing nitrogen.
Most of the speakers pivot between agricultural and environmental science, but Professor Jackie Keenan's focus is more aligned with human health.
So I'm a researcher in the Department of Surgery at the University of Otago, Christchurch, and I'm here today to talk about known risk factors for colorectal cancer in Canterbury. And I emphasise the word known because we've been actually looking at what might be driving the increased risk of early onset colorectal cancer, particularly that we're seeing in Canterbury, and we've been looking for the usual lifestyle risk factors such as sugary drinks and high fat and lack of exercise, alcohol, smoking, things like that. Coming here, for me, I am going to talk a little about nitrates because that's obviously been very much in the literature and it's the focus of this forum today. For me, it's a wee bit like tiptoeing through a minefield, but I'm hoping to just bring my knowledge, my understanding that it may be a risk factor, but it is one of many risk factors. And, you could get rid of all the nitrate in the drinking water in Canterbury and you will still have people developing colorectal cancer. And there's a whole lot that we need to understand about the different pathways that are involved.
Yes. So it would have been quite challenging putting together your talk today.
Absolutely. To say I'm apprehensive would be an understatement.
Yeah. Thank you, Jackie.
Thank you.
Okay, the forum is just about to start and the theatre is filling up quickly, so I might try and grab another interview at morning tea.
It's really exciting to see the work that's been done on that, but there is still a long way to go to reduce nitrogen leaking into the wider environment.
Tom Lambie is a familiar face to many at the forum.
I've been involved in the national level in Federal Farmers. I was Chancellor here at Lincoln, and I was also one of the commissioners for Environment Canterbury when a lot of the present plans were put in place.
Because of the noise levels in the foyer, we chat in the courtyard outside, and I ask him why he's attending this forum.
I'm a practicing dairy farmer, and nitrates and environmental improvement are extremely important, but also we've got to remain productive. We want to enjoy a rural community that is prosperous, but we want to do that in an environment that we can enjoy.
It's a challenging time for farmers.
It's a challenging time, but it's also an amazing time. Some of the technology and the tools that are coming to us make it a really exciting time to be involved in the industry. But what we've got to know is how to use them, and also, is it making a difference?
Yes.
And that's one of the large things. But I'm very conscious in water quality. We're talking today about nitrates. But as Tim Davies already pointed out, there's a whole lot of other things, phosphorus, shade, that go into making really good quality. And we need to make sure that we're doing our catchment work and making individual farming decisions, that we're looking for the best value for money to make the best outcomes. Nitrogen could be in some cases, could be other things in others, but today's fantastic.
Yes. Are you making a lot of progress on your farm in terms of some of these issues?
Yes, well, we're definitely looking at one of our biggest issues. We tend to be on heavier clayed ground, so we've got less of a nitrate loss issue to the groundwater, but we may have some denitrification and some volatilization going the other way. But we're really looking at everything that we can do to mitigate phosphorus loss, and also making sure that we're doing actually changing in farming practice to make sure that we're looking after the soil structure, because that's an incredibly important part as well. So it's fitting what's the best thing for each individual farm and each individual catchment.
Speaking from a fertiliser industry perspective is Warwick Cato, the Science Strategy Manager at farmer-owned cooperative Balance Agri-Nutrients.
I'm delighted to be speaking today to put a perspective around the tool nitrogen, and in particular nitrogen fertiliser, and put some perspective about whether it's a friend or a foe. And my conclusion is nitrogen is not a friend or a foe. It's the man or the humans that use it that are. And so the focus should be on practices and the people component, because that's what really determines the context in which you see nitrogen.
Yes. So what advice do you give farmers? How do you find that balance between productivity and environmental stewardship?
So you have to put it in the context of the farm system or the growing system that's there, and the values that the farmer or grower have, because you have the spectrum we have clients from very green to very right wing, and so your client base actually determines what their particular needs are. But most of them use nitrogen as to either boost yield or to address feed deficiencies in the system. And one of the comments is that hasn't changed since the 1920s, when nitrogen was actually first used in New Zealand. It was to make calving in the springtime safe for dairy farmers, and that's why they've used it. And interestingly enough, it was to make sure we had a continuous supply of butter, so we could supply the UK market over a 12-month period, and it was also to reduce our cost structure and make sure our farming cost structure was globally competitive. And those reasons really haven't changed to today in the dairy context.
Even though you work for a fertiliser company, would you like to see farmers use less fertiliser?
We're decision support. We're a decision support, not decision maker, and that's a really important distinction, that farmers and growers will do what they want to do. And essentially, at the end of the day, we can provide as much stewardship as we can, much advice, protocols, soil testing, but ultimately the excess or abuse or whatever you want to call it is ultimately driven by what the end user wants to use it, and that's the human element,
Yeah, so you're providing the fertilisers, but at the same time you want farmers to apply it sustainably on their land.
Yeah. And so one of the good things that's happened in the last few years is the regen, the conversation around regen. And one of the good things about that is it's brought the focus back on to say, let's optimise how our clovers perform in our pastures first before we bring bagged fertiliser into the farm system. So I think it's actually been a good thing, because ultimately our cheapest feed comes from the natural legume in our system, and use nitrogen strategically. And ultimately, a lot of us in the industry are actually selling or involved in advising our brothers, our uncles, our cousins. And so there's quite a moral ethic to do the right thing, and also to think about who's our global competitor. It's not other farmers or NGOs, it's ultimately other countries, and our role is to make our farmers and growers globally competitive, and that hasn't changed in 100 years.
Yes, and that's important not just for farmers, it's important for all New Zealanders. It underpins our economy.
We've got to achieve environmental gains, so most of our R&D investment want now is in terms of environmental enhancements and to provide farmers with the tools. So I use an analogy, we're like a garage. A farmer will come in and we want to have the best mechanics and the best suite of tools, but we won't dictate which tools or mechanic they use, and that's how we act in a decision support.
As everyone heads back into the lecture theatre after morning tea, I take Keith Cameron aside to ask him one more question. Are there concerns amongst scientists that this topic is not portrayed in a matter-of-fact way by the media?
There is concern. In science, of course, we work on the burden of evidence. What does evidence tell us? And the evidence tells us clearly that nitrogen is absolutely essential for all plants and all animals. Without nitrogen, we wouldn't be alive. And nitrogen can be added to the system in various forms, organic forms or mineral fertilizer forms. And really, it's about the management of those inputs to reduce the leakage from the system. Now, farmers, of course, don't want leakage from the system because it's uneconomic. It costs them money. So they are desperate to find ways that they can also reduce the leakage of nitrate from agricultural systems.
Yes, it's such a big and emotive topic.
Yes, it is an emotive topic because it affects health of people, and we need to get this right.
Emeritus Professor Keith Cameron ending that story from the Nitrogen Friend or Foe Forum, hosted by the New Zealand Institute of Agricultural and Horticultural Science. Cosmo Kentish-Barnes was also talking to Warwick Cato from Balance Agri-Nutrients, Professor Jackie Keenan from the Department of Surgery at Otago University, dairy farmer Tom Lambie, and Professor John Hickford from Lincoln University.
I'm John Whittaker, the flower man from Fielding, and you're listening to Country Life at RNZ National.
Earlier this year, I took you inside Wellington Zoo's food hub to learn more about how they cater to such a variety of animals' dietary requirements. Well, have you ever wondered about how they treat so many critters of different shapes and sizes? Let's head back in for an exclusive look at the zoo's animal hospital, Te Kōhanga, or the nest.
These are all of our patients. Fiona's going to pick one. Which one did you say of a crop wash today?
I've got the Kiriru with the crop wash and Aroha.
So the majority of the birds that you see at the moment, I think all of them, all four, have suffered from window strike. So,
Te Kōhanga, also known as the Nest, is Wellington Zoo's animal hospital. In addition to zoo animals like lions, tigers and giraffes, the hospital also treats over 400 injured native animals each year, which it then helps to rehabilitate and release back into the wild.
And you can see that all of these guys have chest injuries, along with a few other things as well.
And I imagine that limits their ability to fly then as well.
Exactly. So we usually get them when a member of the community finds them in their garden not flying, and fortunately they bring them into us and we can assess them.
Meet Fiona Isham, one of Te Kōhanga's veterinarians.
My name is Fiona Isham. I'm one of the vets here at the Nest Te Kōhanga at Wellington Zoo.
And team leader and vet nurse, Shanna Rose.
And my name is Shanna Rose. I'm the team leader here at Te Kōhanga and I'm a vet nurse.
In the hospital this week when we visit are 4 kiriru, each crash victims brought in to be looked over by the zoo's team, a Cape petrel and a kororoa, or little penguin, named Aroha. You might be able to hear the centre's drainage system, which helps keep the facilities sterile and clean, but is a little noisy.
So each of these birds has a full health check. They get their initial exam when they first come in, and then once they're stable, we'll do a full health check under anaesthesia, and that's because they're all wild. They don't like being handled, and nobody's going to be able to make a bird stay still for an x-ray. And then we assess whether they've got any fractures going on, and then our vets decide on a treatment plan. A lot of the time it's rest and pain relief and supportive feeding and fluids, so we're really hopeful for all of these birds that they'll eventually be released back out into the wild. So that's our goal for every patient that we see here, if we're able to treat them, to get them straight back out into the wild so they can contribute to the wild populations.
Is there a particular time of year that kiriru or other birds are vulnerable to this kind of strike? Or?
Such a good question. question. There's a couple different times of year. So this time of year, the Kēreru are starting to breed, and they're not really thinking about much other than the ladies. I don't know if you've seen them flying before, but they do these amazing aerial displays, trying to charm each other, and also a little bit of territorial fighting and things, and then they can run into trouble. The other time that we get a big influx is sort of after spring, when we get all the fledglings, and they're pretty klutzy birds, and that's when they run into trouble. The other problem that we see when they've hit windows is that they often get picked up by a cat or a dog. So yeah, they can end up with a few more problems other than fractures.
You've got the 4 Kēreru. 4 Kēreru in here.
And we've got one in an aviary who's getting ready for release, so we pop them in a bigger aviary so that they've got room to fly around. They need to be flight strength and waterproof before they go back out in the wild. We've also got a little Cape petrel who came into us. You might be able to see him, he's having a wee swim at the moment, isn't he? So he came into us emaciated, we suspect storm blown, so with all the inclement weather we tend to get a lot more seabirds in. And he has also got anemia. So he's having investigations at the moment. He's had his full health check. He's having bloods regularly to check if he's improving. He's a bit of a mystery so far. But yeah, he's doing really well. Other than that, we're hopeful that we'll be able to pull him through. And again, at this time of year, we see a lot of seabirds that come in. They haven't been able to find enough food, or a storm's made them fly off course and they can't get back up off the ground. The other patient that we've got in is Aroha, who's a little penguin, and we can show you him a little bit later as well. So he's just in with us. He originally came from Waiheke, where he was abandoned as a chick with his sibling. So a wonderful rehab community helped to hand rear them, and then when they tried to release them, Aroha decided not to go. So they tried very, very hard to get him back out to sea, and he's refused. So he's probably here to join our penguin troop. We're just at the moment investigating a few different problems that he's got. So he's gone in for a CT scan, he's had all of his x-rays, he's had bloods. So yeah, we're just making sure that he's nice and fit to go back out into section if we can get him there.
The first job on this morning's rounds is giving the Kēreru a crop wash. And if you're wondering what that is, you're not alone. Fiona will explain it later though.
I thought what we might do first is to just treat our Kēreru who wants his crop wash. So each of our patients has a unique number for them. So I'm looking for 40718, which is always written on their house as well. And every patient has their own towel. We weigh all of our patients every day. It's really important to keep an eye on how they're doing. We also measure their food intake.
The clinic room looks much like any other vet's clinic. A sterile white room with large cabinets filled with medical supplies and a bench for working with the animals. A large window in the corner allows the public to observe. The Kēreru enclosure is covered in fresh cut foliage and darkened green sheets to reduce stress on the birds.
Alright, so once we get our bird out, we make sure that their face is covered. And we wrap them up snug as a bug on the scales. 610 today, which I can then put on his chart and look at how that's tracking. So I can see it was 610 yesterday and 610 the day before. So holding his own, and then we just leave them wrapped up nice and tight in that towel while we service their house. The next thing we do is look at what they've eaten overnight. This is what we feed the Kēreru. We call it Kēreru mix. We make it here. It's basically a mix of fruit, veg and grain. So I need to weigh that. It doesn't look like he's eaten that much. There was 120 grams in there. I've thrown away 95. He could have eaten up to 25 grams, but we've got to allow a little bit for dehydration. So I'll put down 25 grams question mark.
Record keeping is an incredibly important part of the animal care process, especially when they have so many animals coming through the centre each week.
It's absolutely everything. If we were trying to remember what's going on with, 4 Kēreru who are really similar, I wouldn't be able to tell you this afternoon what happened this morning, I need those written records. Shannon's just got a fecal sample that we're going to look at in the lab as well. And so what I'm going to do is I'll do a crop wash, which is where we put some fluid into the crop, some sterile saline, to then look at what kind of cells living inside the crop.
For our listeners who might not know, what is the crop?
Crop.
And myself as well.
Fair enough. So a crop, mammals don't have one, so it's fair enough that you don't know what that is. It is a outpouching of the esophagus, so the tube that goes from the mouth to the stomach, and birds have it there, so it's basically like a storage pouch for food. So a lot of the time there's nothing in it, and then when they eat, they can eat tons all at once, especially when we feed aroha. You'll see we'll put in heaps of fish, and it's like, where did all that fish go? It all just sits in the crop, and then it comes through to the tummy sort of when it's ready. So they can eat a lot really fast and then go away to somewhere that's safe, like high up in a tree, and think about digesting that food over time. So, looks like we are nearly ready. Just always check what medications we need as well. This patient isn't on any medication, so that's easy. So then I get my fluids. I've got two kinds. So this one here is the one for the crop wash. It's just saline, so the same kind of thing that you get in a IV bag. This is human grade intravenous fluid that we use for this purpose. And the second one is Vitrate, which is like Powerade for birds. So a bit of glucose, a bit of electrolytes. It's mostly water, so that's what we give them. Most of our birds get this twice a day. As they get healthier, they get it once a day, and when they're in the aviary, they don't get it at all. All right, so I do the crop wash first. So I take my patient's head, tucked up nice and tight, open wide. Oh, I know. Pop that tube down, make sure it's in the right place. In goes the fluid, then I leave it where it is. Give that crop a little palpation, give a massage, and then I suck out what I can. So what's coming back now is the fluid that went in, plus cells from the crop. I don't need to get it all out, that'll be fine for a sample. And then I put in our Vitrate. He won't need all of this because he's already got some fluid in there from what I've just done. So I'm going to stop there. Straight to bed.
We take a feces sample and send it, along with the crop wash, to be tested in the lab next door, where Fiona checks to see if there are any parasites in the samples. The keraru gets the all clear, though. Fiona's journey to becoming a zoo veterinarian has taken a slightly unusual path.
My path is a little atypical. So I've been here for 2.5 years. So I've been a vet for about 9 years or so before I came here, and I've done all sorts. So I did companion animal cats and dogs practices at first, and then I did an ophthalmology internship, so it's a year of just eyes, and then I did 2 years of emergency work at a 24/7 emergency hospital for cats and dogs over in Australia. After that I did some teaching for vet nurses, and then I did some animal welfare research and advocacy, and then I found myself here. So I've done a bit of everything. I wouldn't say that was the typical or like recommended path to get here. There are probably more efficient ways to go about it, but that's what happened to me.
And how does it compare working in a zoo where you have so many different kinds of animals, particularly a lot of our native species as well?
Completely different. So in like sort of day-to-day community practice, you do sometimes see some natives, but generally if you have somewhere to send them, you send them there for the best care. We have a lot of specialised equipment and special skills that you just don't use in cats and dogs. So we see so many more, native wildlife patients than I ever did before, and it's completely different.
Each animal presents their own challenges. Some make better patients than others. Luckily, the facilities are well equipped.
We are set up here to deal with all of our native species, and then everything within the zoo could come here to the nest with the exception of the giraffes, who are just too big. So we can go to the giraffes if we need anything, but every other species can come in here. So we have out in the halls big weigh scales on the floor, so it's like built into the floor. So if we've got, let's say, an anaesthetised lion on a gurney and we want to know what he weighs, we can zero the gurney, roll the gurney and the lion onto there, and then we know what they weigh. Things like our sheep walked down here this morning to use those scales. They have good manners and can come in. But we're pretty set up to deal with most things. Like the table, sometimes we have to put on an extension, like a second table next to it for our larger patients, but most of them fit pretty well.
What animal do you find most challenging to work with? Is it a kind of a size thing or a personality thing?
Oh, it is all of the above. All of our patients have different personalities. Some of those personalities are bitey. If that bird has then got a pointy beak that's really sharp and they're kind of big, I'm thinking about some of our really naughty shags who kind of put their head back and go pah, like that. And they can be a bit challenging to deal with, but they're quite fun as well. Like, we like the ones with a bit of fire. And the patients who are really, really small are really challenging as well, just in terms of handling, and there's only so much blood you can get out of them, there's only so much you can do. That can be a bit awkward as well.
There's no such thing as a typical week at Te Kōhanga.
There isn't really a typical week. So every morning we start with bird treatments like you saw, and every afternoon we finish with bird treatment. So it's a bird treatment sandwich, and then in the middle we do whatever needs doing with our zoo patients, whatever needs doing with our hospitalised patients. So yesterday, 3 of the birds you've seen this morning got general anaesthetics in here on this table for x-rays and bloods and physical exams. And we deal with obviously any new birds that come in, which some days we get no new birds, some days we get like 6 new birds, you just don't know.
It's time to check on Aroha, the little penguin.
What we need, check Aroha's chart, make sure we're all prepared. I'm done with that one. So I can see this morning that Aroha needs to be weighed, needs to have some vitrate, some Sporanox, which is a preventative fungal medication. Seabirds are really prone to getting fungal infections in the hospital, something called aspergillus, which lives all around us, and when you're healthy you can handle it, but when our seabirds are a bit run down, they're more likely to get sick from that. So we just give them that to keep them nice and healthy, and he needs a swim.
Fiona is mindful of wearing gloves to prevent the natural oils on her hands from damaging Aroha's waterproofing in his feathers. We move from the clinic room to the paddling pool area where Aroha can enjoy a swim.
Aroha will be in his night house, block the door because occasionally he runs out into the pool. Off with the lid. Hello. And again using my towel. Hi, I'm so cute. Pop some box.
Like the keriru, he gets put on the scales to be weighed and gets a little bit of vitrate.
7.5. Let me take a look. As Aroha's a longer term patient, he doesn't get weighed every day. So I'm just looking back to a few days ago, and he's gained weight since then, which is always nice to see. So I need to bring all of my goodies. Vitrate like the other birds get. Oh, fish, towel, penguin.
Happy with the progress he's making, it's time for a feed.
So some species, like shags and mollyhawks, we can just put the fish on the ground and they'll eat it. Penguins never do. You can leave them there, they can starve to death before they'll eat fish from off the ground. So we always have to put Aroha's food into his mouth.
And what happens to the wildlife when they've been treated?
So the aim with all of the native wildlife that we treat is for them to be released back, but exactly what they need depends on the species and how long they've been here. So for our keriru, for example, if a keriru comes in and has a really minor injury and we can release them after 5 days, as long as they have full feathering, we can pretty much just pop them back out into the wild because they won't have lost a lot of fitness. But many of our patients have orthopedic injuries or have damaged or missing feathers, which mean they can't fly or they're not waterproof, and so sometimes we have to pop them in our aviaries. So our aviaries are like a big space, it's open to the air through a mesh, and we only need to handle them sort of every 4 days or so to clean the aviary out, where those birds are basically sitting, waiting, flying to build up a little bit of fitness and growing feathers, working on the waterproofing. Once they're getting rain on them, that helps their waterproofing too.
I was speaking to veterinarian Fiona Isham at Wellington Zoo's Te Kōhanga Animal Hospital. I also spoke to team leader Shanna Rose.
So, Janina, how are those keriru doing now?
You'll be pleased to hear they were all released back into the wilds of Wellington, and the Cape petrel was also released into the Cook Strait with the help of maritime police.
And how about Aroha, the little penguin?
He was unable to return to the wild, but he's found a new home with the zoo's resident Kororoa colony. You can find some photos and videos of those patients being treated on our website, rnz.co.nz/countrylife.
And that's it for this episode of Country Life. Do let us know your feedback by emailing country@rnz.co.nz.
Click follow on your app if you don't want to miss an episode of Country Life. And if you enjoyed the podcast, we'd love you to give us a plug on social media or tell a friend about the show. Click the share button in this app to send this episode to a friend.
The stories in this episode were produced and presented by Janina Schwanica and Cosmo Kentish Barnes. In the studio production team today, David Knowles and William Saunders.
Catch you next time.
Ka kite.